lighting up.
I just mute it.
All right, stand up, Moses, and go.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm David Moses with Integrated Engineering, and you have made it to the last and final session of the virtual partnering conference. Just as a side note, I am accepting virtual drink tickets if anybody has any. Just want to mention that before we get started. So we're getting ready to talk about applying the Highway Safety Manual to rural roadways in Kentucky, a case study. With us today, we have Darrin Eldridge, a very senior transportation engineering branch manager from the Kentucky Transportation Cabinet in District 9. Karen Mynhier, who has to put up with Darrin every day, so give her, go easy on her. She's got a really rough life. But she's the District Environmental Coordinator in District 9 for the Transportation Cabinet. And Courtney Evans, an engineer with Vaughn and Melton Consulting Engineers. And with that, I'll let the smart people talk.
Thank you, David. I'm going to start off the presentation today by just introducing our project area. Then I will turn it over to Courtney, who will be providing the bulk of the presentation and talk about how she applied the Highway Safety Manual to our project. And then Darrin will finish us off with some closing remarks and final thoughts. Okay, the Kentucky 32 corridor is a major east-west connection in the northeastern quadrant of the state that provides a connection for District 6, 7, 9, and 12. It runs generally from the Georgetown area of Scott County, travels through the communities of Cynthiana, Carlisle, Flemingsburg, Moorhead, Sandy Hook, and then eventually Lawrence County. The majority of the route is classified as a rural major collector, but between Flemingsburg and Moorhead, it becomes a rural minor arterial. And in the Moorhead city limits, it actually is an urban minor arterial. It serves as the only viable truck route between Flemingsburg and Moorhead and allows access to I-64 in Moorhead, I-75 in Georgetown, and to some north-south routes, which then allow access to CSX and the Ohio River. Here's a map that shows, Kentucky map that shows basically the limits. Courtney, if you just want to run your cursor over Georgetown to the left, can you see that? Sure. Just showing where the corridor is basically. So, Georgetown will be on the left part of the map, and then, of course, Louisa is over to the right with communities in between. Our project area 9-8903, which is what we're talking about today, is just outside of Flemingsburg, and I kind of showed you there with the purple box where that area is. Again, it's in the rural minor arterial section. Okay. So Kentucky 32 in Fleming County is a 2-lane rural minor arterial with narrow shoulders and deficient vertical curves at several different locations. There are entrances and approach roads that are interspersed along the 55-mile-per-hour route, which has contributed to a cluster of crashes at some locations. Our project area begins at a previously improved section of the Flemingsburg bypass to the west, which is a Super 2 55-mile-per-hour roadway in that section. And it extends to Kentucky 156, and where it will tie into a pavement rehabilitation section in Fleming County that is nearly complete. And with that project, they paved the existing earthen shoulders and did basically a rehabilitation. ADT for this section of Kentucky 32 varies between 5,000 to 6,400 with 9.5% trucks. There were 50 crashes that occurred between 2012 and 2017, which did include 19 injuries and 2 fatalities. And we had a major cluster of rear-end accidents at the Asbury Road intersection. So based on these things, the purpose and need was established as to provide safe, efficient traffic flow by providing low-cost safety improvements, turn lanes, and pavement rehabilitation with wider paved shoulders. The existing conditions and typical section in this section of our project is that we have 2 11 to 12-foot lanes. We have 5-foot earthen shoulders in most locations, 4-foot ditches. The horizontal curvature does meet or exceed the minimum standards for 55 mile per hour, and super elevation rates exceed the maximum recommendations. There is at least one vertical grade which exceeds the maximum, and that was at our James Road intersection. And there are several places that do have vertical sight distance deficiencies, and there's inadequate clear zone throughout the project limits. And here's some photos that show you just basically the representative of the project area, kind of show you what it looks like throughout the corridor. Okay, when we originally scoped this project, we kind of had in mind to do a pavement rehab or a glorified pavement rehab type project because we had had some success with a Round County pavement rehab job along Kentucky 32, where we basically paved shoulders and did a rehabilitation of the roadway, did some culvert work and that kind of thing. So that's how the job was originally scoped, but we knew that we did have some areas that had crash locations, and we also had some vertical deficiencies, which the Round County section did not really have. So we went into this thinking that it was going to be, like I said, a glorified pavement rehabs. But we did want to take a look at the 55 mile per hour as well. So we asked the consultant to design a 55 mile per hour alternate with full typical throughout the project limits from beginning to end, just for comparison purposes to see what would happen. We also asked them to look for an overlay alternate with a reduced typical, basically 5-foot shoulders throughout the project limits. And then we knew because of the crash locations and vertical deficiencies that we had some areas where we could use some spot improvements. So we asked for a spot improvement alternative as well. And they were going to be designed at 55 mile per hour. We really thought that the 55 mile per hour would not be acceptable from a construction cost and a right-of-way impact perspective. But as the design proceeded and was developed, we realized that it really wasn't as infeasible as we thought it was going to be originally. So during one of our project meetings, Courtney had a brainchild to basically combine the best of those 3 alternatives into one alternative that better fit the context of the project area on both the western end and the eastern end, as well as best satisfy the purpose and need. So that alternative became the combination alternate, and that became our preferred. So with the combination alternate, we have 55 mile per hour with 8-foot paved shoulders from the beginning of the project to Asbury Road. And what this does is it incorporates 2 of the spot improvement areas, which were also designed with 55. And this seemed to make sense because this is the higher ADT section. Most of the crashes had occurred in this section, and it best matched the typical section of the adjoining Flemingsburg bypass section that it was tying into on the west end. We also included spot improvements in the form of turn lanes at 3 locations, basically intersections, where they were warranted based on crash data and the vertical grade deficiencies. And then also we have an overlay section that runs in between 2 of the spot improvements, Asbury to James Road, and also from James Road to the end of the project on the east end. And this made sense because there are fewer crashes in that section, and it best matches the typical section of the rehab project, which came to be shortly after we started this project. We had a Fleming County, Kentucky 32 rehabilitation section as well. And again, it paved existing 5-foot shoulders. So our overlay with 5-foot paved shoulders ties into that section best. And it seemed like most of the accidents in that area were caused by animals. And so the 8-foot paved shoulders didn't make sense. So the 5-foot worked there. So that's what we decided to do, was have the combination alternate. And it looks something like this. You can see the red area is the 55 mile per hour section. The blue line indicates where the overlay will be with 5-foot shoulders. And then the 3 spot improvements at Seacrest Crossing and Kentucky 111, Asbury Road, and James Road. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Courtney so she can tell you all about the Highway Safety Manual.
So when we first presented the idea of the combination alternate to the district, we had to develop a way to quantify why we were doing the spot improvements where we were. And so we went to the Highway Safety Manual and used the predictive method to do this. This slide here is just kind of an overview of the process, just kind of lays it out step by step. The first thing that we did on this project was we took an inventory of the roadway. We split the corridors into small homogeneous sections. We looked at the horizontal and vertical curves, lane width, the shoulder width and type. We also looked at driveway density, roadside hazards, and other things. At the intersections, we looked at the type of intersection that it was, whether it was a 3-leg or a 4-leg. We looked at the approaches that had right or left turn lanes, whether or not there was lighting, the skew angle that it tied into the main line, and the traffic volumes. The next thing we did was we gathered the crash data. First place we went was the Kentucky State Police database. This gave us a good source of information, but we also knew that the people living in the community and also the district had knowledge of unreported crashes and near misses. This allowed us to better quantify where these locations need to be focused at. To analyze the data, we plotted the crash data in the plan and the profile. We also broke the crashes down into categories based on the type and then looked for patterns in the crashes. This is an example of how we did it. And as you can see, this little cluster right here, that's Asbury Road. And as Karen mentioned earlier, that was one of the high crash locations on the project. The next thing we did was we input the existing conditions into the IHSCM spreadsheet. We didn't use any SPFs or CMS when we did this. This just gave us our base conditions for comparison. After that, we adjusted our calculations for the local variations by using the Kentucky SPFs provided by the Transportation Center and the empirical base method. Using this information, we looked at the types of crashes that were occurring and were predicted to occur, and then identified potential countermeasures based upon the geometry of the road and other features that might be contributing to those crashes, and then applied the appropriate CMFs. So the countermeasures that we looked at on this project was we looked at varying the shoulder width, rumble strips. We also looked at reducing the percent grade where we had vertical curve deficiencies. At the intersections, we looked at adding left and right turn lanes and adjusting the skew angle. So that's when we got to the combination alternate. And as Karen spoke about that earlier, we split that into 2 corridor sections and 3 spot improvements. So for the 55 mile per hour section, as she said, it was 12-foot lanes with 10-foot shoulder. The overlay section, we kept the 12-foot lanes, but we reduced the shoulder to the 5-foot to match the adjacent rehab project. And we also addressed the vertical curve deficiencies at James Road. So this was the existing conditions on Asbury. As you can see, we have a lot of driveway density here, and that contributed to the high number of crashes. To address this, we made these entrances right in, right out only. We also added left and right turn lanes, and then we realigned the approach. Based on the Highway Safety Manual, it predicted that there would be a greater than 50% reduction in total crashes at this intersection. James Road was the other location we looked at spot improvements. As you can see, the vertical curve here caused some issues for the intersection sight distance and a lot of crashes for people entering and exiting the highway. What we proposed here was to realign the approach. We added left and right turn lanes, and we also did vertical curve correction that ties into the overlay section. Kentucky 111 Seacrest was probably the most difficult intersection to analyze because it didn't fit very neatly into the Highway Safety Manual. As you can see, we have some channelization of the turn lanes. You have some severe super elevation, and you also had this little acceleration lane coming out of Seacrest. The Highway Safety Manual didn't really give us a good way to analyze that, so we just kind of had to use our engineering judgment and do the best we could. We did analyze this in 2 ways with existing conditions. We looked at doing it as 1 complete intersection and then 2 separate intersections. This gave us 2 sets of data to use. We knew neither one of them were all that accurate, but it gave us a starting point. So we looked at two alternates here. The first one we looked at was a four-legged approach. We added left and right turn lanes, and we corrected the super elevation. The second alternate that we looked at kept the two approaches offset, but it introduced this two-way left turn because you didn't have enough room to fully develop the left turn lanes. When we ran the analysis, this was actually predicted to be the safer intersection type. But considering this section right here with the two-way left turn, it introduced some conflict points that wouldn't really meet driver expectations. And as a design team, we used our engineering judgment and experience and went with the first alternate. Darrin.
Well, first thing, I wanted to thank our moderator, David Moses. I thought he looked very studious sitting in front of his 099 remedial physics book. I just wanted to, give him my appreciation for calling me a very senior branch manager. Anyway, first off, I want to say that, my knowledge of the highway safety manual and the interactive highway safety design model is very limited. It was several years ago when we started, and it still is. The first time I'd heard about it was during a consultant marketing meeting a few years ago. Then later I attended the first day of a 3-day FHWA HSM training class held in August of 2018. Then in 2019, I attended a 1-day FHWA performance-based flexible solutions workshop that discussed the HSM as well. Other than those three very limited training opportunities and combined with a little bit of online research, that's basically all the experience that I had prior to this project. So when I first heard about HSM and SHDM, I was intrigued. I couldn't really fathom the possibility of having a way of predicting the number and types of crashes on a particular type of roadway. And I found it even more interesting that various safety improvements could be analyzed to find out if they would reduce the rate or severity of crashes. So we honestly talked about this at the district office and started looking for projects to test it on, basically. Either ongoing projects or new projects. So the first project that we chose to look at highway safety model on was Greenup County, Kentucky 207 reconstruction 9-8509. And this project, preliminary design was nearing completion, and the environmental document, which was in the A-FONSI, was underway. The preferred alignment was very expensive, or is very expensive, and created many relocations. We began a PBFS study to reduce costs and impacts, and decided to implement the highway safety manual. After several failed attempts to calibrate the software to predict the existing conditions, the project team basically lost all confidence in the data provided by the model. So we ended up abandoning the HSM as part of the PBFS study. The HSM inconsistently predicted approximately 2 times as many crashes than what actually occurred. And, we spent a lot of time studying that and trying to figure out what was going on. We used the basically the new Kentucky, what are they called?
SPFs.
Yeah, say that letter.
SPFs.
SPFs, yeah, which actually didn't improve the situation at all. We ended up deciding that the geometry of the roadway was so bad that because it was basically a road that was used by people to travel back and forth, people who were used to the road, that it was so unsafe that it was safe. And I know that sounds kind of funny, but we think that the model has trouble with a road that has such bad geometry. Anyway, so the second project we evaluated using the highway safety model was this project, Fleming County, Kentucky 32, rehabbing with safety improvements. Excuse me. Of Courtney and Bonham Melton used the model to provide a good prediction of existing crash rates. The project team felt confident in the data, so we used it to evaluate the proposed spot improvements. The data provided by the model was used to select the improvements that provided the best benefit cost and allowed us to stay within the project budget. And basically, this is something that we had hoped that we could use the highway safety model on before we ever tried to apply it. So it worked out for us on this particular project. So in summary, the highway safety model is a powerful tool that can be used to accurately predict existing crash rates. It can be very useful in evaluating proposed improvements and selecting the ones that provide the best benefit cost. However, we found that it doesn't work in every situation. So my takeaway on this basically is that project managers and designers should recognize and understand the difference between accurate, meaningful data versus inaccurate, meaningless garbage, and should apply sound engineering judgment in the application of the highway safety manual. And I know that may sound like I'm, kind of putting it down, but the reason that I'm doing this presentation is because when we looked at the Greenup County, Kentucky 207 project, I had no faith in it at that point, and was basically fighting the direction to continue to apply the highway safety model. However, we found out, through Courtney's, diligence in this case, or expertise, that it can be used, and you can use it to help you keep a project on schedule and on budget and within scope. And that's how we use it here. And I would have to say that this was a success, and I'm pleased to present that the software was used successfully in District 9. With that, I'll ask Karen and Courtney, do you have anything else that you'd like to add? Okay, so we'll turn it over to questions, I guess, at this point. Can you pull up the chat questions?
I'm on the chat.
Yeah, just feel free to read any that look good. If you don't like them, don't read them.
I haven't got any
That was
yet.
a joke.
Oh, wait, hold on. Maybe. Are completed safety projects evaluated for crash reduction and refining prediction models? I've not been involved in that. That would be a KYTC thing, I think.
Yeah, that's a good question. And I really, I'm going to have to, I don't even know who to ask at this point. I guess Jill Asher was kind of looking at HSM data for the cabinet. Excuse me. I'm not sure who now the right person to talk to would be. Possibly John Moore. Anyway, but that is a good question. Maybe we can find out an answer for that.
The next one, does the district intend to follow up over the next few years to see how accurate the prediction is?
I would love to say yes, we would. But I'd also love to say we track pavement designs and asphalt contents and everything like that and follow up on those every year too. And we don't do it just because of time. But I'm hoping that in this case, that would be
Since that's a
beneficial.
local project, we ought to be able to know how many crashes are occurring and whether they've been reduced at Asbury for sure. We have people who live on Asbury Road, so
Yeah.
possibly we could follow up in that way.
Well, that's a good point.
Just anecdotally, maybe.
Yeah, that's very true. But yeah, I think, that it's probably worth actually taking a look at it 5, 10, 15 years, pulling the crash information and including it in a database so we can see if this is a successful application. So good point.
Who determines the amount of money to be used for a project?
God. Project budgets. Honestly, I love I've blown project budgets for 25 years, estimates, but the way it typically works is a project scope, schedule, and budget is created in the planning process at the district level. they become a CHAF, which is an acronym, which basically used to be a PIF, which is Project Identification Form. But anyway, in that, a planner, designer, in our case, district design, project development branch manager, me, will help the planner create the estimate for the project, along with the scope and the schedule. And typically that is then ranked through the shift process, and if we're fortunate, then it becomes a plan. It actually gets put in the highway plan. Now, it's legislatively the schedule, the legislators can change that, but we've had very good luck with the information that we prepare going into the plan, the 6-year highway plan. So the answer to that question is a good part of the time we do that.
David Ritchie wants to know, have you started smoking or is that the Rona?
Because of the coughing.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Hopefully it's neither.
Yeah, hopefully. Funny, Richard.
That's it.
Okay. Any other questions? Got some time here.
Oh, look, there we go. Are there any normal projects? Was asking for Mitch Thomas.
What did Mitch ask?
Are there any normal projects?
I think I know where that came from. The answer to that, Mitch, is no. There are no normal projects. They were all completed just before I started working for the highway department.
Kevin Cox wants to know what % of crashes don't make it into the KSP database. I don't know that we actually know that.
No, but that is an excellent point, and I'll give you an answer. We have a project in Elliott County, Kentucky 32. It's a reconstruction project, and it's basically between Moorhead and Sandy Hook. Very, very rural area. Very, very terrible alignment horizontally and vertically. And there's a world of low speed crashes out there where many people run off the road, might even hit something, but it never gets reported. And the way we found that out was through public involvement. We had people coming in saying, well, I know there's more crashes than this out there because I saw 3 last year. And, basically that's because the police are never called. So it's never entered into the database. Or another problem that we have periodically is it gets entered in, the police are called and it does get entered into the database, but the mile points are not entered, or lat and long are not entered correctly. So when we're looking at crashes, we try to look for clumps that are at like a county line, mile point 0. And if we see that, we know that that's probably inaccurate data. So we try to take that all with a grain of salt. But just like Courtney said right off the bat, we don't know when crash information is not entered into the database.
That's why we talk to the residents and the people in the communities, because they see more than is ever recorded.
Yes, correct. Yeah. Good question. Okay. Another question?
Not yet. Oh, what factors did you use for predicting traffic crashes? I'm not sure I understand the question.
Can somebody elaborate on that one a little bit?
While we wait on that, we got another one here. If a portion of crashes don't get reported, could this have been why the 207 project had less crashes listed than what the HSM predicted, especially with so much local traffic?
That's a good question. I'd like to say, I'd have to actually go back to our consultant on that and see if that was something that was considered, because that could be a possibility. What I will say though, that on the 207 job, much like the Elliott job too, though, clear zone is non-existent. And if you run off the road up there, odds are you're not going to get back on without calling tow truck and basically the police. But I don't know that would be really a correct answer there. It could be, that could have been part of it. That's a possibility. But I will say this, the factor was 2 times. When I say 2 times, if we had about, I want to say 200 accidents in a 5-year period, the HSM model was predicting 400. It was basically a factor of 2 times, which is a big difference. Anything else? Anybody that knows me knows that I'm always for basically quitting early. So unless there's any other questions, we'll thank everybody for attending and call it a day. Okay. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks.
Just exit out.